All right, another NFL draft is officially in the book, so I wanted to take the time to go over, my favorite classes. I'm not necessarily a big draft grader. I know why that's a fun and kind of easy content piece to produce, but I'm just not real big on grading the drafts before, these players have actually played in the NFL. Again, I get why it's fun to do that and why necessarily, they happen, those pieces happen, but I like to just focus on really my favorite draft classes as a whole, go dive into a couple of the teams that I really just enjoyed their classes because I enjoy their players and where they got them, some of the moves they made. This isn't really going to necessarily factor in any type of trade value or trade moves necessarily, just kind of really diving into who they took, the prospects that they took, the players that these guys are, and the role that they could play. So as you can see, we're going to start with the Cleveland Browns. Really a lot of people's favorite draft classes rather. Really enjoyed what they did after the first 2 days. Especially, that's really where I kind of started formulating a lot of these teams in these classes, kind of as you can see on the screen. But man, starting with Spencer Fano, my number one offensive tackle, really my OT1 from April 2025. We're talking, almost a full calendar year was he the top offensive tackle prospect for me. That did get challenged a little bit. It came close. I really love Maxi Onachor, who got drafted in the first round by Pittsburgh. I really like Blake Miller. I think we all kind of knew that in some capacity Cleveland was going to go tackle and receiver with their 2 first-round picks. I went back and forth as to which order it would be or should be in some of my mock drafts. I think ultimately, 2 things. The fact that Carnell Tate was gone off the board at that point, I think it made sense to go tackle. If he was still there, I would have probably been more in favor of them going, with him with that 6th overall pick and going tackle later, just because, we saw 9 offensive linemen go in the first round. I think 7 of them tackles, 6 or 7 of them tackles. So you knew you could get a pretty good caliber tackle at 24. Whereas the difference between maybe Tate and the other receiver may have been a little bit bigger. So we're splitting hairs here. But also the fact they were able to trade back, from 6 to 9, acquire some more picks, some extra capital, and still get a player from those calibers. Man, really a huge move, a great start, for them to kick things off. And then, doubling up with first-round picks with Casey Concepcion, a really, really good talented receiver. I think he's got the makings of being really a top 15 guy in the NFL, top 20 guy. We want to always try to be realistic about some of these comparisons that we're making. But, man, easily one of the better receivers in this class. We saw what he was able to do, at Texas A&M, moving from NC State to A&M. We saw him kind of bounce back from that down second year at NC State. Has never really had steady quality quarterback play in college. He's going, so he'll be prepared for at least that first year in Cleveland, for whatever they're going to do at quarterback. We don't know. We saw, some promising signs of play from Shedeur. We don't know what's going to happen at quarterback in general. Though. We just don't know what we're going to get at Deshaun Watson. So we'll see. But to kind of follow up on that, right, and then to double up and kind of piggyback off that pick and go Denzel Boston with their other second-round pick, man, not only is it a good player, a really good player that they got, but the fact, like we said, they're doubling up on receiver. And really, not only are they doubling up, but they're getting 2 different players, right? You're not getting any sort of redundancy between these 2 guys, right? You have a Casey Concepcion who's a 6-footer right around there, and you have Denzel Boston who's this bigger 6'3", 6'4" body. They win different ways. They kind of align different ways. We'll see if Denzel Boston becomes kind of that, power slot type. A huge mark of his game is, the separation question. So we'll see. I think he's got a little bit more wiggle and a little bit more juice and overall ability to create separation than maybe some other people credited him for or evaluated him as. But ultimately, man, I just slam dunk first 3 picks, right? They've got to infuse some life in that offense. Got to shore up that offensive line. So I really loved what they did. And then again, staying in the second round, they definitely had my favorite second round combo. There weren't many of them. I think there were only about 3 from what I remember counting, but they had the best, the best duo of picks in the second round with going, EMW, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety out of Toledo, who I mocked in the first round at one point, maybe even in 2 of them. Definitely a trendy first-round pick, first-round prospect, and for good reason. Long, rangy, just a really, really good player, really good safety player, man. They are going to infuse some life and some juice into that secondary. I think he's got the potential. He's got the ability to play from day one. I think all 4 of their first picks absolutely do, even if they weren't in Cleveland. But I really do think that, man, their first 4 picks were just slam dunks. You can't get really any better than that. And then moving over, from there, again, shoring up their offensive line with Jake Slaughter and Parker Brailsford, 2 interior players. Again, doing a good job of shoring up that offensive line and just making that a strength and trying to. You always have to spend, in my opinion, you have to spend multiple draft picks along the offensive line in every draft. It does not matter where you are as a team. you have to spend multiple picks along the offensive line just because there's a shortage of quality offensive linemen in the league. So continuing to build out the depth, spend some late round dart throws, even though they're not technically, these two aren't technically late round in the sense of being, 5th, 6th, 7th. I think that they're two quality players. Ability to continue building out, the center guard center, right? That middle three we'll talk about a little bit throughout this video, but I can't say enough good things about, taking an opportunity on those two guys. And then coming back in the 5th, let's take one of my guys, Justin Jefferson, linebacker at Alabama. I'm going to link that video above if you want to check it out. Love Justin Jefferson, man. Again, when you're taking a 5th round linebacker, you're not really expecting him to even be a starter, right? You don't go into the 5th round taking a linebacker saying, man, we're going to take this guy with the expectation that he's going to be a starter, right? We're going to develop him into a starter. Now, maybe Cleveland does think that, and maybe he will become that. He might. He has some of the developmental traits that can become an NFL starting linebacker. Right now, I'm not saying that is going to be his most realistic case, but I do think with what we see as a skill set, he has the ability, at least physically, athletically, to be a special teams contributor from day one. Absolutely. We know that at Bama, man, you're going to have to play special teams. And even with, Saban not being there, that still rings true, man. And that's a whole different conversation for another day. All types of good players play special teams in some capacity, but I really think he's got the ability to be a contributor from there in day one. And man, these bottom 3 guys, a ton of fun. We'll kind of double up with the tight ends. I love Joe Royer. Love Joe Royer, man. I can't say enough good things about just how fun of a player he was. When you're watching him, I remember the first time I watched him in 2024, I'll kind of link this eval, throw it up there too so you guys can check it out. But a huge, pretty big gap, almost Grand Canyon size gap between who he was as a pass catcher and who he was in the run game. Now, of course, that's always that's kind of why he gets pushed down into the 5th round, because for as good as he was in the passing game, he has some warts in the run game that, make him borderline unreliable when you're projecting him to a every down NFL starter. Now, if you're projecting him into a role player, things of that nature, obviously, your expectations are going to change. The role for him is going to change. But man, he is athletic. He can defeat man coverage. He can be a quarterback's best friend in the passing game. A huge outlet for quarterback Brendan Sorsby last year at Cincinnati. Really love that pick. And then finishing things off with the other tight end, BYU's Carson Ryan. Another fun player that I really like. When you go back to the Utah tape, I don't think really Utah and UCLA, man, he's kind of bounced around a little bit. He's shown good signs at each stop along the way. I really think BYU might have been his best year. So a little bit older prospect, not really the same kind of caliber of athlete as even like a Royer or some of those other guys who get drafted before him. And that's why he goes in the 7th round. You're not really, again, level of expectation for him is naturally going to be low as a 7th round pick. He's going to have to try to make it on special teams. But, as tight end, as an older guy who's played a lot of football, we'll see, man. We'll see what happens. Maybe he doesn't even make the roster. You never know with 7th round picks. But, again, I really liked who they were as college players. Again, with your level of expectation in these later rounds is naturally low. So I really like the dart throws, though, because they have players and they have traits, both physically and athletically, that can find a way to some sort of role in the NFL. Man, finishing this thing off with Taylor Green. I mean, a really, really fun quarterback prospect. There's a reason why he went in the 6th round. He's not going to beat you as a thrower. He's just not. When you're projecting him, to the NFL, that's not his skill. So you don't watch this guy and go, man, I really think he's going to defeat us as a thrower. And we kind of had the same thoughts, when we were at Auburn, when I was at Auburn and we played him. That was one of the things that we really kind of talked about as a staff, was like, man, we don't think that he can beat us throwing the ball, but I'll tell you what, that 6'6" body, when he gets going and gets outside the pocket and he runs, man, it's just a totally unique, different skill set. People talk about him as maybe being a position convert, position switch. You just never know. I'd give him a shot at quarterback. I'm sure he'll get a shot at quarterback. But most importantly, man, it's a different kind of skill set that he provides to that quarterback room. So I'll be really interested to see how he does. Again, the 6th round dart throw. I really felt like he was a guy that was going to get drafted regardless. I was kind of looking at maybe Philly or Baltimore or something like that, something with an offense that kind of tailors to his skill set pretty much. So I'll be interested to see how he does. I love the shot on it. Take a shot and see what happens. But man, really love what Cleveland did as a whole. One of my favorite draft classes. All right, we're going to move along and we're going to keep this thing alphabetically. I'm not ranking these classes or doing anything of that means. So we're going to move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, man, kicking things off with Ruben Bain. I don't think there's really any debating that this was one of the better picks of the 1st round, man. This guy is dominant. He's disruptive. A lot has been made about the lack of arm length and things of that nature, and I totally get that. Totally warranted conversation. But defensive line, man, it's all about being disruptive, making plays at and around behind the line of scrimmage, and that's what he does. He has NFL level strength. He has NFL level power. cannot compliment them enough for just taking what came to them. And that's really the theme of their entire draft, and really kind of the theme of Jason Licht as a GM, man. He just kind of takes what comes to him. You know, they're not totally opposed to moving up and down the board, but we saw what they were able to do, man. They just let good players fall to them, really, and that's what it is. Him being available at 15, that's a no-brainer slam dunk that you got to take. Bolstering that defensive line, we knew they were probably going to go that route going into the draft. You know, defensive end, edge, it was a very popular spot for them in mock drafts at 15 overall. And you got a great player in Ruben Bain, who, again, we know the lack of arm length, but it doesn't matter. I'm telling you, he's going to be a really good NFL pro. I'm really excited for him, for the fit, for Tampa as a whole. And again, kind of just letting the board fall as it does, letting players fall to them as they do. They took advantage of that throughout the rest of the draft. Josiah Trotter being there in the second round. We knew that that's probably where he was going to go at some point in the second round. We knew, you know, once Indy and Atlanta were on the board, you know, specifically Indy, we kind of knew or felt like it was very, very rumored, very popular pick in mock drafts to mock a linebacker there. We knew that's probably where they were going to go, but they get a great inside backer in Trotter, man. Downhill player. He's got good athleticism. Obviously, that's probably the piece that keeps him out of the first round. You know, the caliber of athlete he is relative to some of those other guys, but man, this guy has starting potential. There's no doubt about it that he can be a quality starting linebacker in the NFL. They go to Ted Hurst after that, one of my favorite receiver prospects in the entire class, man. I was really, really hoping the Rams were gonna really 61st pick, kind of towards the end of the second round. I was hoping they were gonna nab him. You know, a guy that really could become kind of that vertical downfield above the rim player that they're losing in Mike Evans. Obviously, you're never gonna compare anyone to Mike Evans. It's just very hard to do, and we may not see that again for quite some time, the level of consistency that he provided, but man, he's going to give you some version of that, right? He's going to become quarterback friendly for Baker Mayfield and just making his strength stronger. You know how good that receiver room is, and after you kind of bolster the front seven, now you go get a big vertical perimeter presence for Baker Mayfield. So I love that pick. Going back into the fourth round, you get Keontae Scott, one of the best nickels in this entire class. We knew he was going to be really a day two guy. We felt like he was going to be a day two guy, really popular name, kind of in second and third round mocks. Not the same caliber of athlete as other guys that went before him, and really I think that level of athleticism is kind of what kept him, you know, from being that day two pick when you're asking him to be in coverage and things of that nature. But man, we know that in today's NFL, having that nickel, that run defending nickel, that guy who's not afraid to put his face in the fan, defend the run, man, that's what he is, and he's going to provide a huge spark to that defense, in my opinion. And then in the fifth round, you know, going back to the interior, DeMonte Capehart and Billy Schrouth, two of their fifth round picks, offensive defensive line. Really good, really good players for fifth round picks. Again, like we say, when you go into day three of the draft, the longer that you're going into the draft, fifth, sixth, seventh round, your expectations for these players are naturally lowering. I think Billy Schrouth was probably a guy who maybe should have gone back to school and really developed in another year and bolstered his draft stock. But he was a guy who was getting, you know, some early day three, late day two love as an interior player. And DeMonte Capehart, man, we knew kind of how that Clemson defense, really Clemson as a whole, right? The team didn't really fulfill expectations, but man, he was a great player for that defensive line. Got overshadowed by the other two defensive linemen on that team. A really good player. I'm excited to kind of see what he can do as a fifth round pick. It's not uncommon for, you know, later round defensive tackles to find their way into a playable role. You can never have too many good interior players again. That's why you're not surprised to see them using picks on interior guys on both sides of the ball. And then finishing things off, Bauer Sharp, really fun tight end prospect. Had a chance to kind of evaluate him when he was at Southeastern Louisiana, when he was at OU, at Oklahoma, and man, this guy can do some things now. Again, sixth round pick. We know that he's not going to be a traditional Y. He's not an inline guy. He's light. You know, he's a sub 245 guy. Probably going to play around 240, 245. We'll see. But man, really fun athlete. Was a high school quarterback and was doing some things at Southeastern. Was playing Wildcat quarterback and doing some things where they were trying to get him, you know, the ball in his hands. Really fun athlete. We'll see what we can do on special teams. Maybe provide some spark or provide some sort of contribution on offense. And this is another element that I really want to highlight as we're talking about these draft classes and trying to contextualize, you know, who are the good ones, who are the bad ones, who are the A's, the B's, the C's, the D's, the F's. You know, shout out to you, Rams, maybe the Jags. But as you can see, the net talent added versus value over expected. So this is a very good way of tracking, you know, where guys are being picked relative to where they should have been picked, the value of it. Again, the consensus board is, there's been a lot of discourse going around about the value of the consensus board and really almost what the point of it is or what value does it provide. But man, the consensus board year after year has proven to be a pretty good historical marker of guys being picked where they should have, value falling. A big point of contention, again, was really Jacksonville's class because we saw so many players being picked, you know, above where they were on the consensus board, you know, the reach of it all, the value of it all. And they did get some really good value in Emmanuel Pregnon. I got to shout them out for that because I think that guy, I think he is a starting NFL guard, and they got him with the 88th overall pick. Now, he's a little bit older. You know, there's some concerns, some issues about who he is as an athlete, you know, laterally, is when you're asking him to be in zone schemes and do some of those things. I think it's a little overblown to the point of like, I don't think it's so bad or so detrimental that should have pushed him into the third round. But I think that's a great value add. But as you can see, Tampa, right? We're going to get a good shot at seeing where Tampa is, right? Naturally, like most graphs, you want to be in this upper right quadrant. And again, we didn't mention it in the beginning, but I do. The Jets and the Eagles were 100% my two honorable mentions, where if you were to rank, the 6 teams that we're going to talk about today, 1 through 6, these would be in some capacity 7th or 8th. And the reason they're not really as my 6th favorite, that while they're great, I do think they're very, very good drafts. I think ultimately I really just like these other crops of players better, and that's really why they're honorable mentions. But there's no doubt, there's no debating the fact that if you were to make any type of list of top 10, whatever, you're gonna feature these 2 teams. They had really good drafts. The Eagles trade for Jonathan Grenard and things of that nature, and just the ability to take good, solid, quality players across the board. But as you can see, Tampa is in a pretty good spot. This is where you want to be, making the most of your picks, right? And same thing with Cleveland. We're seeing Cleveland here. Same thing, man. Making the most of your picks. The New York Giants, same thing. When I was looking at them, man, I gave them real strong consideration. If you were to go kind of a next tier, another honorable mention below, these 2, it would have been New York for me personally. I thought, again, now we know Arvell Reese to kick things off. I love Colton Hood. I like Malachi Fields relative to where they got him. You can make an argument for New York for having a top 10 draft class, top 5, maybe top 7 draft class as well for sure. But Tampa, man, this is where you want to be. So I really love the Bucs class. And that's going to bring us to the Detroit Lions, who really had one of my favorite first-round picks in tackle, Blake Miller, and here's why. Look at this profile, man. This is what you want to bet on with a first-round tackle. Now, with Detroit's class, it's one of the classes that I think is going to be talked about. It's not really going to be one of maybe the A's or maybe even B pluses, top 5, top 7 classes. Generally, I don't think you're going to see much of that because I don't think it's a class that's going to be perceived as having much upside. You get a player like Blake Miller who's played a lot of football. Jimmy Rolder's played a lot of football. Some of the other draft picks have played, a lot of football. Doesn't have the same kind of maybe youth, high upside, all that. But, I don't think that that's been Detroit's style necessarily, right? They're about taking good football players, right? Taking the best players that can help their team. And I know all teams do that. But I really think it's kind of been Detroit's MO, right? With going running back and linebacker in the first round a couple years ago. I don't know if you guys remember, they got eviscerated for those 2 picks. They got crushed, lack of value, all that. And look what happened, man. They have taken 2 of the best players at their respective positions in the league with those 2 picks. So I'm always going to really trust Brad Holmes. They've been one of the better drafting teams in the last couple of years. They're really a fairway hitting drafter. That's just kind of what they are. They're going to always aim for the fairway with their picks. And this is another great example of this with Blake Miller. And I get it. Same thing, man. PFF grades. I know the discourse are not end all be all. I totally get that. I do think there's a lot of signal in their offensive line grades, though. I really do believe that. And I think with Blake Miller, you're getting a guy who's, as you can see, 6'6", 315. Played almost 4,000 snaps. Look at the low post-snap penalty totals, right? And it's decreased over the years, 4 to 3 to 1 and then to 1, as snaps have been, pretty steadily consistent as that starter. So, man, a 4-year starter, played in the bowl game, which, again, I don't ever really fault guys for not playing in the bowl game. I do think that, man, there's a lot of credit to him for staying and choosing to play in the bowl game in a completely lost season for Clemson. Right? There was zero really need or reason really for him to play in the bowl game, but he did. He chose to, and so I got to give him some kudos, for that. So this big athletic experience player, man, this right here, it's a slam dunk for me. As a first-round pick, it really, really is. So, man, I love the Blake Miller pick. I love the prospect, all of that. So really kick things off, the right way, so to speak, is something that really just got me excited. I'm not even a Lions fan, but as it's been discussed, this move for Penei Sewell from the right side to the left side, it makes total sense, right? That's what they want to do. They're going to move him to left tackle, so we're going to draft this kind of plug-and-play right tackle. And I really maybe thought they were going to go Yannichor, but they go with Miller, and I kind of get that because, again, like we talked about, right, you want more of that plug-and-play, that true guy who can come in from day one and be the starter. I think Blake Miller has a little bit more of that. He's got the higher floor, whereas Yannichor has kind of the higher ceiling. So I totally get it. Great pick. Love it. Really good way to start the draft. Jimmy Rolder, 4th-round pick. He's a fun player, man. Turn on his film. He is a thumper. He is really almost like that old school throwback downhill, put his face on you, will crush guys. So I think automatically that alone is really going to make him almost like a special teams demon. I think there's a lot of potential to provide some early value there on special teams. Derek Moore, there were some really interesting edge names on day 2. You can make an argument for liking some of the other guys above him. I think I kind of did, but choosing to go with him, I think it's a negligible difference with going with him as opposed to some of those other names that were available at the time. Really good player will be, that rotation, that reliable rotational rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson that they need. And just, again, throwing more resources, especially with some of the more early value or higher value picks on a guy like him. So really don't have any types of qualms or gripes with it. And then you go back into the 5th round with 2 guys, Keith Abney and Kendrick Law. Keith Abney, the ASU corner, he was a guy who was getting some real day 2 love, some 3rd round, maybe even some 2nd round love. So some potentially great value there. I think the consensus board, he was a 3rd round guy, in the 90s range. So some great value to get him in the 5th round. And then same thing with kind of Kendrick Law. 5th round was more of the appropriate range for him as opposed to Abney, really. But man, you take a speedy, explosive guy. This is what this offense wants to do, man. They want to have guys like this with Jahmyr Gibbs, J-Mo. Amon-Ra isn't necessarily that kind of archetype, but he provides some more of that, some more real juice that can provide, some assistance to Jared Goff. We'll see how much burn he's really going to get as that 5th round pick. He's probably going to be a bottom of the receiver room guy naturally early on, but we'll see if he can do something on special teams. Again, like we talked about, played a lot of football, experience, can run, all of those things. So real good opportunity there. Love the dart throw in the 5th round. And then kind of closing things out in the 6th round with resources along the defensive line, man. Like we talked about, spending more to develop that defensive line. That's what it's all about in this league. You can never have enough good defensive linemen. So again, Detroit draft class, when you're looking at some of this content that's come out after the draft, you're going to see top classes, grades, blah, 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 all this stuff. You're probably not going to see them in the upper echelon, but it's one of my favorites. Again, I think that it's a fairway draft like we talked about. Getting Blake Miller to start, man, I love that pick. I love the Rolder pick a lot. I like the Derek Moore pick. I love the Keith Abney pick. I love the Kendrick Law pick. The 2 defensive linemen, again, taking dart throws on those guys late with Tyree West, Skylar Gill-Howard, man. Different kind of body types, but really liked what Detroit did. And that's going to bring us to the Carolina Panthers, who I really do not want to have to rank these classes, but man, if I was doing a top 5, maybe even a top 3, I'd probably put them in there. I just love what they did. Again, it's not a big class. It's not as big as some of these other teams that we've seen, but I cannot emphasize enough how good of a job I felt like they did, kicking things off with Monroe Freeling, your future left tackle. I love it. Really good player, really ascended throughout the process. 6'7", 315, sweet feet, great basketball background. Love it. That is a great start. And then you go into the 2nd round and you take Lee Hunter, game wrecker. I love it. Interesting body type. You're probably going to get a variety of opinions on him as a player, but like we talked about with Ruben Bay, man, disruptive. This guy's a disruptor. He plays behind the line of scrimmage. We really saw in the Oregon game, even against Pregnon, who, like we said, was the 88th overall pick. He had some really good wins against Pregnon. So really love the Lee Hunter pick. You go to the 3rd round, and then you get Chris Brazzell, man. This was a guy who was getting a lot of day 2 love, especially in the 2nd round. A bigger, longer body, could, again, throwing resources at the receiver room and at the offense to try to build Bryce Young up, to really see what you have, really try to extract the optimal amount of ability, talent, production that you can get from BY. So I love the Brazzell pick. He's not your traditional Tennessee receiver. Even then, I think he's got more traits than even a guy like Dante Thornton maybe had, even Jalen Hyatt might have had. So I love the pick. Again, 3rd round. We know there's going to be a middling level of expectation, but I would not be surprised if he really usurps Xavier Legette and becomes, more of a reliable pass catching threat for Bryce Young and for that offense. So I love the pick. You go into the 4th round, you get Will Lee, a corner out of Texas A&M that I've had a chance to see and recruit and offer out of the transfer portal. I really love this guy's film. Again, to kind of kick things off day 3, throwing resources at the corner room. I love it. See what you got. He's a longer physical presence. He looks the part of an NFL corner for sure. Now he's got some grabbiness and some other things about his skill set. Really some of the traits that naturally pushed him into the 4th round, but I love taking a shot on him there. And then you move into the 5th round and you get a potential starting center of the future with Sam Head. This was a guy who was a riser for me throughout this process. I wish I had some sort of timestamp to prove it, but he was a guy I really started looking at in October, and I was like, man, I know he's a center, but this guy is an NFL draft prospect, no doubt about it. I really would not be surprised if he became their starting center of the future. He has had a tremendous 2025 season, great, NFL draft process. I'm surprised he didn't go earlier. Now, again, like we talked about, being the center position, it is going to get overlooked and passed upon more often than not. Again, as we talk about value and things of that nature, I had him as a 3rd round guy. I really thought Cleveland would be eyeing him in the 3rd round. Obviously, they went Jake Slaughter, so kind of right, fit, right time, but wrong player type of deal. I love Sam Hecht. I think that's a great pick. And really, moving over to Zakee Wheatley, I think kind of the same thing, man. Great value in the 5th round. I saw him as a day 2 guy at safety. Long, rangy, can run. But again, same kind of thing, right? That value, that position that's not as heavily valued and all that. So I think with those 2 picks specifically, they could have some tremendous value. I think those 2 guys really do. Again, we're not going to go around calling 5th round picks or projecting 5th round picks to be starters. But if those 2 became starters, for them, I really would not be surprised in the slightest. So I love that, and you're kind of finishing things off with Jackson Kuwach, linebacker at Miami of Ohio. I didn't watch much of him. I don't have much of an opinion of him as a player, but he's a really, really good athlete. And again, like we've talked about, in the 7th round, man, you're taking dart throws and flyers on great athletes all day. And that's a position where you never know. You might be able to get a starter out of it. Again, we're not going to call or project him or predict him to be a starter at any point in the NFL, but he'll probably have some ability to provide some special teams value, the type of athlete he is, and just being a linebacker in general. We know what that can do for the defense and the special teams. So I love this draft, man. Rounded out well. Again, like we talked about, I don't want to have to rank him, but we're looking top 5 here, maybe even top 3. I love what Carolina did, man. This has the chance to really build a strong foundation. And again, this is another huge reason why, like we talked about, the consensus board and how it relates to value and things of that nature, reaches versus bad value. Again, take a look at some of the lower ranked, lower graded drafts in this entire class, right? That's who shows up down here. Jacksonville, San Francisco, you get LA down here. They kind of had some mixed reviews about their draft. Houston and Pittsburgh and things of that nature. But look at who's all the way at the top. Carolina, man. They did a really good job of not reaching, of taking what was available to them, capitalizing on good players being available where they were. And it's the same thing we're talking about, right? Here's Detroit. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the Raiders as well. The Eagles, again, like we talked about, one of the better rated drafts that you're going to see kind of across this whole process. Washington, same thing. I know a lot of people love their draft. So again, this is a really, really good opportunity for Carolina to really build on this, build some momentum, over the next coming years. And right on cue, we have the Raiders drafts. Obviously, they kicked things off with Fernando Mendoza, first overall pick. We knew he was going to be the first pick for months on end. Don't really have any strong or contrarian takes. I really like who he is as a player. Again, if you want to get into the whole debate of, is he the first overall pick in other classes? I don't even want to say normal. I was going to say normal, but in other classes that we've seen with quarterbacks, I don't know. Probably not, but it doesn't matter because he is absolutely worthy of being the first overall pick. I think he's a really good quarterback. I think, whatever his warts are relative to other quarterback prospects that we've seen in the past, I think he's sharp. Not the same caliber of athlete as like a Drake May or Caleb Williams, and I think that's why he gets pushed down. But even then, that's bad process of evaluating quarterbacks. We've seen that bear out time and again, that chasing the athlete at that position does not work. You got to chase the caliber of player that Mendoza is. And I'm not even saying chasing the caliber or like chasing a Caleb Williams or Drake May is bad process. I don't want to conflate those two because they had real traits, real abilities as passers, as pocket processors. There was no doubt that they were worthy of going where they were and things of that nature. Is Mendoza in that tier? I don't know. Maybe not. Probably not. But I don't want to get into the weeds of it. He was first overall pick, no-brainer, slam dunk. Has the opportunity to sit behind Kirk Cousins, which I think is a great opportunity for him. We'll see what kind of Tom Brady and that staff can do and all those things, moving parts. But obviously fairway pick, no doubt about it. In the second round, Traden Stoops. This was a guy who's getting a lot of first-round buzz heading into the draft. It's one of those kind of like Tuesday, Wednesday night, Thursday morning flyers. This guy could sneak into the first round, and it makes sense. Super versatile. They listed him as a safety. He's played corner, been a nickel, done a variety of different things. This dude is a very good football player. He's probably one of my favorite players in this entire class. So I'm really not surprised he went 38th overall. That's a great pick. Great pick. Cannot emphasize that enough. Go to the third round. You have 2 picks, starting with Keyron Crawford. We recruited, so I was at Auburn when we took Keyron in the spring transfer portal from Arkansas State. From the moment he stepped on campus, he looked like an SEC player. There was no doubt about it. The body type, kind of the physical traits, the physical attributes. He looks like it. He looks like an NFL player. That's not to say he can't be an NFL player or won't be one athletically or things of that nature. It's just that's what really stood out about him, man. The strength, the size, the dimensions, the way that he's structured, just everything, man. He looks like an NFL player. Obviously, for him to be a third-round pick, there's no doubt about it. Seeing him, that first year get acclimated to SEC play, especially getting there so late, after the spring, and then really using the full process to get up there and kind of capitalize on that 2025 season, a third-round pick. So maybe a touch early for me. I probably would have had him as maybe an early day 3 guy, but again, when you're pick 67, you're pick 101, 102, you might be splitting hairs a little bit, especially as an edge guy. So we'll see what happens. Again, throwing resources at the defensive line. Not going to hate or criticize them for that. And then their second, third round pick, kind of closing things out. Trey Zoom, listed him as a guard. He was a tackle at Texas A&M, so might be able to play all 5 spots in the NFL. I don't know if he's an NFL tackle for sure. That's why I say might be able to. Probably going to maximize his ability at guard, maybe even center. But again, I think he's got starting potential along the middle 3 in the NFL. So potentially getting a starter in the third round with pick 91. Man, I think that's a no-brainer pick. I love it. And then in the fourth round, to start things off, in the fourth round, pick 101, it's probably the pick of the entire draft, if we're being honest. The biggest talking point, Jermod McCoy, all kinds of first-round predictions. Now, he was a guy that going into the draft, I had him mocked in my very first mock draft in January. I had him mocked 20th overall, which was definitely lower than you were seeing. And then, once he ran the pro day and did all that, I moved him kind of back up into that 12th, probably that 12th spot with Dallas, where it was a popular landing spot and all that. And then it came back out. News came back out that there was more issue with his knee. I don't even think it was his necessarily repaired knee. It was another knee. Again, these ACL recoveries are super tricky, so you just never know what's going to happen. We don't even know what's true and what's not really true, but man, he was a guy that, unfortunately, I felt like going into the draft on Thursday, one of my bold predictions was like, man, I think he's going to fall out of the first round. You kind of saw that with Will Johnson. It's not uncommon for these guys. He hadn't played since 2024. Now, granted, in his 1 year at Tennessee as a true sophomore, it was fantastic film. Obviously, it was good enough to warrant those kind of top 5, top 10 rankings, predictions and mock drafts. I'm surprised. Again, while I'm not surprised he fell out of the first round, I am surprised he fell all the way to the 4th round. Obviously, Vegas traded up to go get him, so that could be the biggest surplus value pick of the entire draft. Again, we're talking about a guy who was seen as a top 10 prospect, and he goes 90 picks later, so we'll see what happens. I'm rooting for him. I don't even know don't know him from Adam. He doesn't know me, but just kind of hearing his story and things of that nature, I'm really rooting for him. He's a great player. I hope it works out. Obviously, the injury would suck. It would suck for his career to be derailed because of an injury, but man, rooting for him. Potentially one of the best picks that we may see from this entire draft. Staying in the 4th round, you get Mike Washington Jr., bigger back. A lot of questions about his production, a late kind of breakout guy. That stuff is a really tricky projection, and it really makes it hard to kind of evaluate how good a running back's going to be in the league when they're older and they're not really productive until they're older. So we'll see. Again, had the great 40 time, bigger back, really good compliment to Genty. And I think, again, just bolstering the offense, you can't go wrong with that. Now, with their last 4 picks, I'm not as familiar with who they are as prospects. Dalton Johnson was a guy who really wasn't even on my radar kind of whatsoever after going back and watching the film and doing some of the analytic profile and dives. Again, a 5th round dart throw, pick 150 on a defensive back. He was Sukes' running mate back there, so I don't hate that. Again, a guy who you're going to try to get on special teams and see what he can provide. Hezekiah Massis, him I am familiar with. Obviously, a transfer portal player, had a great year at Cal this past year. We've kind of seen what Cal can do, developing some of those portal DBs, so that could be a really good steal. I'll be interested to see how that goes. Malik Benson, very familiar with, from his time at Florida State and Oregon. Again, dart throw, pick 195, throwing something at the receiver room, seeing what happens. You never know what kind of value you're going to get. And same thing with Brandon Cleveland, man, 7th round. We've said it so many times before, but just continuing to invest in that defensive line, spend some resources there. 2 defensive line picks, a bigger body, interior presence. We'll see what you can get out of him for sure. But man, I love Las Vegas's class. Obviously, Jamal McCoy could be the crowning jewel, which is crazy to say, knowing that they had the 1st overall pick and they could have a franchise quarterback. Obviously, if Mendoza becomes who they hope he becomes, he's no doubt the crowning jewel of the class. But again, like we talked about, the potential value with the Jamal McCoy. Man, this could be an absolute steal. And again, more case in point, when you're trying to describe and kind of contextualize these classes, again, the top right quadrant, that's where you want to be on these graphs, right? More traits, more production. And again, it really confirms what we've seen and what we've talked about, what else we've seen in the media, right? The Jets and the Eagles, top 10 classes for a lot of people, top 5 for a lot of people. Cleveland, who we've talked about and has been a fan favorite. Las Vegas, same thing. Here are the Raiders, right? And we know when you're kind of reading a lot of these consensus reports and write-ups, those are a lot of your top classes. The Buccaneers, same thing. Now, Arizona, a little bit different. I think obviously the Jeremiah Love pick kind of skews things in that regard. I love the Chase Bisontis pick. Don't want to get into them too much. I didn't hate their draft class by any means, but again, these kind of 5 teams are who you're seeing when you're looking at these articles and these reviews of who the top 10 classes, where you're seeing those five franchises in a lot of them. So again, more traits, more production. I think that's a smart move for the Raiders, who, man, they've had the #1 overall pick for a reason, and their quarterback room is going to be Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza. Hardly a proven history of winning football when you're trotting out Kirk Cousins at this stage and an unknown rookie. So again, betting on the traits and betting on production really just reinforces a great draft overall. All right, we're going to close out this video with the New Orleans Saints as one of my favorite draft classes in this entire 2026 draft cycle. And I'll tell you what, if you've been following my content, watching the channel, man, you already know that this 3rd round pick right here, Oscar Delp, man, this is my guy. One of the best tight end prospects in this class. I would entertain an argument for him, being tight end 1 over Kenyon Sadiq. Was my tight end 2. I just love the pick. Now, I don't want to skip over these other 2, but man, New Orleans, okay, starting with Jordan Tyson. He was a guy that I wasn't sure if he was going to be a faller, what was kind of going to happen with him, knowing kind of the injury history that he's had. But when he's healthy, and if he can stay 100% healthy, man, I'm telling you, this guy has top 10 receiver potential in the league. I really don't doubt that for a second. I think that his ability to win in a variety of ways, really him being kind of the acrobat receiver that he is, just the functional athleticism before the catch, at the catch point, after the catch, all that. I think it's got top 10 NFL potential, man. I really love the pick. That's a great selection to boost kind of your quarterback play and trying to bolster that receiver room with Chris Olave and some of those other guys. So love the start, man. And then the second round to go get Christian Miller, one of my favorite, again, like we've kind of talked about with Carolina and some of these other teams who we didn't talk about, but this 3-pick stretch right here, it might be my favorite of the entire draft. Man, it's certainly one of them. It's hard to pick, but man, this dude is a dominant game record. And if you've been watching the NFL, you've been following what's happening in the league, you need stout run defenders along the defensive line. That's why Keldrick Falk is a first-round pick. That's why some of those other guys go higher than they do, because you have to be able to be reliable in the run game. It's great that you can rush the passer and do those things. It's partly why I don't love David Bailey being the second overall pick. Now, granted, that's a different value conversation for another day. Fantastic pass rusher, fastball pass rusher, can do a lot of those things. But in the run game, he had some real warts that just made me concerned about how you're going to hold up on a down-and-down basis in the league. So we'll see. I really like the players. An honorable mention, my guy, but a guy like Christian Miller, and I know I'm comparing edges to defensive tackles in this scenario, so to speak, but Christian Miller, man, to see what he's done in his career at Georgia and the ascension as a player, I love this pick. One of the best defensive tackles in this class. Him and Caden McDonald are probably, my two favorite. I really like Peter Woods too. Very, very narrow differences from a grading standpoint, but love Christian Miller. Third round, Oscar Delp, my guy, man. Again, if you haven't watched the My Guys video, go check it out. Like I said, I linked it earlier above. Really like Oscar Delp, man. I think he's going to have the ability to do a lot of what they want to do on offense, getting into 11 and 12 personnel, maybe some of the 13 stuff they do. We'll kind of dive into their offense a little bit in the offseason, but love Oscar Delp, one of the best tight ends in this class. Kind of a victim of unsteady quarterback play, we'll call it. The ability to, he had no issues getting open, I'll tell you that much, man. He can run. He played the season on a fractured foot, and then they kicked things off day 3 with Jeremiah Wright, who, again, I was around at Auburn. Really good dude. He has really ascended as a player, had a pretty good 24. He was really one of the more improved players, it felt like, between 2023 and 2024 for us at Auburn. And then obviously in 2025 really cemented who he was as an NFL draft prospect. So really excited to see what he can do. Again, continue to throw resources at the offensive defensive line. That should be a consistent theme for every team. And then the next 4th round pick, Bryce Lance. This dude right here, one of the few FCS players who got drafted. I think it was 4 FCS players who got drafted this year. That kind of tells you who he is as a prospect, as a player. And not only that, but he was a really popular day 2 pick for a lot of guys too. Kind of he and Chris Brazzell were a lot of the favorite, day 2, trendy day 2 receiver picks. Really athletic, a long, bigger body. Not quite the same players as Jordan Tyson, even Chris Olave. I would say Jordan Tyson's probably closer to Chris Olave than he is Bryce Lance. So again, continuing to kind of avoid the sense of redundancy in the receiver room. This is a guy who, for a 4th round pick, I really do expect him to see targets next year. I really would not be surprised to see, him have a healthy number of targets. We'll see, obviously, what happens with Tyler Shugg and the offense as a whole. In a normal setting, right? In a normal setting where Shugg is healthy and the offense, can be more than playable, right? I think he's going to see targets. And then in the 5th round, Lorenzo Styles crushed the combine, one of the fastest 40 times in this entire NFL draft cycle. 5th round dart throw on an athlete. And it's a tale as old as time, and it's something you really have to do. I fully expect him to kind of be a special teams demon. We'll see what happens again defensively in terms of being a player. Again, like we've said many, many times, when you get in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, predicting these guys to have any type of role or impact on their side of the ball is pretty marginal. We'll see. I think he was kind of seen as a 7th round, maybe even undrafted type. So 5th round may be a little early, but man, when you're the 6th pick for a team and you crush the combine and things of that nature, I will never fault them for taking a shot on a guy like that. And really kind of the same thing for Barian Brown. Barian Brown can run. He can really run. So again, when you're taking a chance on a guy who can run like that and has the athleticism, we'll see if he can provide, some sort of spark on special teams, maybe even as a returner. We'll see what happens. But 7th round pick, close things out. The Saints close things out with TJ Hall, Pride of Fresno. Shout out to 559. Really, really good player. A guy who I thought might have gotten picked a little bit higher. I would probably take a shot on him in the 5th round or so. If not, maybe 4th round's a little bit rich, but probably 5th round. I would have taken a shot on him. Day 3 pick, same thing though. Kind of maybe splitting hairs there, but a great opportunity to draft a guy from Iowa, man. I'll tell you what about Iowa. They don't produce, they're not the Georgias of the world or the Ohio States or the Alabamas of the world, but they have done a very, very good job of developing the kids that they sign in high school and turning them into NFL players. So I'm really excited to see what he does coming from that Iowa defense. He's asked to do a lot of things, but I really love the dart throw again, 7th round on a cornerback like TJ Hall. And then same thing here, man. We're going to keep these graphics flowing. As you can see, the most athletic draft classes, average of the first 7 picks in the draft. NGS does a really good job of tracking, their athleticism metrics through the combine and what their players are doing. And as you can see, man, Vegas, 3rd overall too. We have the Saints 5th overall. I know Chicago's draft class has gotten some pub. Buffalo's draft class has been, you'll see that. You'll see them come up in some favorite draft classes. San Francisco, again, you'll get some differing opinions for sure on them, but New Orleans did a really good job of attacking those athletes. We saw that. Jordan Tyson, Bryce Lance, who we talked about, great athlete. Lorenzo Styles, Brandon Brown. All these guys were really, really good athletes. Jeremiah Wright's a really good athlete too, relative, to his body type and, being a guard. Christian Miller, same thing, obviously, with Oscar Delp. So really love what New Orleans did. Really love all 6 of these classes. Very excited to kind of see the future of these players as a whole.